So I'd have to say that 2025 has been a pretty great year for sports tech, probably the best we've seen in years. There's been plenty of different sports watches and smartwatches, of course, which are very exciting, but there's also been some other very interesting products that came out that kind of blew me away, like stuff I've never reviewed on this channel before. So in this video, I wanted to go over all my top picks for my favorite pieces of sports tech from 2025, whether that's going to be wearables, to earbuds, to bike trainers, then of course watches. We're going to try to talk about it all. And I've already got full in-depth reviews of pretty much everything I'm going to be talking about in today's video, linked down in the description below, so feel free to check those out once you're done over here. But I do want to mention that this is a 100% unsponsored video, and all my reviews of all these products were unsponsored as well. These are just my top picks of my favorite pieces of tech that came out in 2025. But if you would like to support the channel and are interested in anything I'm talking about here today, I'll have some affiliate links for these down in the description below, and those links don't cost you anything extra, by the way. It's just an easy way of you helping support content just like this without anything extra out of your pocket, and I appreciate it. Alright, so we're first going to start with kind of a banger and easily one of my favorite pieces of sports tech of 2025. So these are the AirPods Pro 3s. So one of the biggest upgrades with the AirPods Pro 3s are heart rate sensors on the earbuds themselves. But based on my testing of the Powerbeats Pro 2s, well, I wasn't necessarily expecting much out of these because, well, I wouldn't necessarily use the Powerbeats Pro 2s for heart rate tracking. But with these, completely different story. So when I first tested these a few months ago, I was a bit shocked because when I went to compare the data to other external heart rate sensors that I was wearing, it basically mirrored the data I was getting from my chest heart rate strap, which is usually the most accurate source of data when it comes to heart rate accuracy. I literally thought it was somehow accidentally pulling that chest heart rate data into the earbuds themselves. So of course I tested and retested and then tested again, but the results just kept on coming up the same. These just did an amazing job regardless of whatever I threw at it. So that's going to be running, cycling, weight training, as well as high intensity interval training. They just matched up extremely close to all the other external sensors that I was wearing. So Apple definitely learned a lot from the Powerbeats Pro 2. So whatever changes they made from those to these, well, it definitely worked. And in fact, these are so reliable for me that I've been using these as another reference source when it comes to heart rate accuracy when testing watches, because even with chest and arm heart rate monitors, those can have blips from time to time. So it's just nice to have a fallback with these as another reference source with all my reviews. But these are of course earbuds at the core, so they need to sound good, but they also made some improvements there as well, where with the AirPods Pro 2s from the originals, there was definitely a little bit of improvement, but this is definitely a noticeable difference with the AirPods Pro 3s, especially in the low end, where you can actually hear that thump now with the bass. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, and this again came out of left field and was probably one of the biggest surprises of the year, at least for me, were the Oakley Meta Vanguards. So I'd already purchased a set of the Oakley Meta Houstons, but with those, I found myself wanting to like them, but not necessarily loving them, and it came down to a few different things. So first off, the camera's offset to the left, and as a cyclist, well, when I went to record footage, it looked like I was riding like way over here. But the other thing is that the field of view wasn't as wide as what I would have liked, and then they also weren't a sports focused design with a wraparound lens, and the water resistance rating was a little bit like eh. But with the Meta Vanguard, so these solved nearly everything I didn't like about the Houstons, where the camera's now centered, there's also a wider field of view, it's a sports focused design with a wraparound lens, the water resistance rating is also better, and as kind of a bonus, the speakers are also louder. And to be honest, I went into my review of the Vanguards thinking I really wouldn't like them, again based on my experience of the Houstons, but I've come to love these things, and these come with me on pretty much all my outdoor activities now. The biggest drawback these have, and this is going to be similar to the Houstons, is that these only shoot vertical video, and as a YouTuber that was a pretty big bummer for me because I was hoping to use these for some of the YouTube videos on my channel. You can do some editing tricks to make these work, as well as like punch in on the footage, but punching in on a 3K image and then publishing on a 4K timeline doesn't necessarily look amazing. However, for social content, these have been great, and I publish more on social than I do on YouTube anyway, so overall these have worked out well, but if these shot horizontal, these would be next level. Alright, so switching things up entirely, another surprise this year were these Zwift Click 2 controllers, and the reason I'm including these on the list is that they're super simple, super cheap, and they just work. So what they did with these is essentially merge their Zwift Play controllers with these Zwift Click Pod, where you have pretty much all the functionality of their Zwift Play controllers in these two little pods now that you can mount pretty much anywhere in your bars. Like for me, I always tended to use the Zwift Click over the Zwift Plays just because when I'm riding indoors, I tend to spend a lot of time in the top, so I'd have the Click just mounted on the top of my bars, but then I wouldn't have the functionality of the Play controllers. With the Zwift Click 2s, well, that basically solves that. But again, you can mount these Zwift Click 2s pretty much anywhere in your bars. Anyhow, I definitely had to include these on the list because again, they're just like super simple, they're super cheap, and they just work. It's a great formula. And another great release this year for indoor cycling was the Wahoo Kickr Core 2, and the reason I'm including this in the list isn't because it was a massive upgrade from the previous generation by any means. They were able to add some nice updates to it, but more importantly, they were able to keep the price pretty much the same as the previous generation. The original was kind of a legend when it comes to budget-level direct drive bike trainer, so they basically had to keep the price low, especially considering a lot of the other competition at this budget range. But they were still able to make some nice updates like making it more stable with a new leg design, having Wi-Fi for more connectivity options, as well as some other bells and whistles like having a race mode feature for virtual racing. And another piece of tech that kind of took me by surprise that I didn't necessarily expect to like was the Garmin Alpine Gradient Simulator. So this is a gradient simulator pretty much like the Elite Riser as well as the Wahoo Kickr Climb, but it combines the gradient simulations, steering, as well as forward and backward movement all into one unit. The Kickr Climb was definitely the originator here, having gradient simulation as well as adding forward and backward movement a little bit later on with the Kickr Move. And then the Elite Riser came along adding steering functionality, but the Alpine basically combines all those things in one unit. But I think the reason I ended up liking it so much is that it actually seemed to change the ride dynamics of using it with the Neo 3M or the Neo motion plates, where using the 3M or the motion plates all by themselves, it seemed like the movement was a little bit too jerky or a little bit too fast. But adding the Alpine on there seemed to change the ride dynamics a little bit, where it seemed to slow down that movement a little bit, and it felt a lot more natural to me. So combining the Garmin Alpine with the Neo 3M and then actually even adding Zwift Virtual Shifting into the mix is probably one of the best indoor experiences that I've ever had so far, but obviously that does come at a price. All right, so moving on to wearables now, and the first thing that we definitely have to talk about is the Helio Band from Amazfit. So the announcement for this was a little bit strange, where they first announced it at the Hyrox World Championships, where they were going to be giving these out to their athletes, but there's no real word on a public release. But this is something that everyone had been hoping for, is a screenless health and activity tracker that can give you recovery and training feedback all without a subscription like a Whoop Band, and probably even more so after the announcement of the Whoop 5.0. And for the cost, well, $99, and again, no subscription required. And for the feedbacks that it provided, it was pretty good for the most part. It definitely had some quirks here or there, but I'd say that overall the feedback was pretty meaningful. Now, Whoop definitely offers more features like their health span feature as well as some other bells and whistles, but the Helio Band still offered all the core features I think most people need, like sleep, recovery, and training feedback at a far lower price, and again, without a subscription. I think the big missing piece for the Helio Band at this point are going to be more premium band options, because the stock wristband as well as this armband right here, well, they're not like amazing. They're basic for the most part and they work, but they're not necessarily like fashion pieces like Whoop can be. And there's definitely also some improvements that could be done with like automatic activity detection, but again, at the price, it's kind of hard to complain about the Helio Band. So moving on to watches now, and the first one we're going to talk about is the Suunto Race 2. And if I had to give an award out for like most improved or something like that, this would definitely be it, because the Race 2 solved one of the biggest weaknesses of Suunto watches before that, the heart rate sensor. And this is actually a reliably decent sensor now. So when the original Suunto Race came out, that made kind of a splash because it offered a lot of features, it was super rugged, it had great looks, and it had a great price, but it was just hard to recommend because of the heart rate accuracy, at least that I saw. But the Suunto Race 2 has totally solved that. So this is now an easy recommendation for an outdoor-focused mid-range sports watch, again at a price that has stayed pretty competitive. And another big winner for me this year was the Forerunner 970. So the Forerunner 965 was so darn close to a perfect watch. It basically had all the features of their higher-end Phoenixes in a smaller and lighter case, and they also even added some premium touches like a titanium bezel. An odd thing missing though from the 965 was a sapphire lens, but they finally added that with the 970. But not only that, they also added the dedicated LED flashlight, and that basically sealed the deal for me. The price did increase over the previous generation, but still, the 970 is a compelling option if you want a lot of those Phoenix features, as well as some of that durability at a lower price, especially considering that the price of the Phoenix 8 and the Phoenix 8 Pro have increased quite a bit. But the 970 does seem to hit that nice sweet spot for a premium sports watch without necessarily going overboard, and it's probably my personal favorite Garmin of the year. Now, moving on to the completely other end of the price spectrum now, we have to talk about the Chorus Pace 4, and just like the Pace 3 before it, it's hard to not call this one of the best budget-level sports watches that you can get. And the biggest news with the Pace 4 is that they updated it with an AMOLED display, which some of you may like and some of you may not like that decision, but battery life does still remain pretty decent on this thing, all while still remaining small, and more importantly, keeping the price tag pretty small as well. Chorus really nails this budget-level sports watch category, and the Pace 4 is really an easy recommendation for anyone that's just getting into running and fitness all the way to a more serious marathoner. And another watch we have to talk about in the budget-level category is the Apple Watch SE3, which now has an always-on display. And it was basically getting a little bit awkward where the Apple Watch SE2 was one of the last watches even on the market that didn't have an always-on display option, but they finally added that with the SE3. But along with that, they also added some other features that I didn't necessarily expect, like one-handed gestures, like their double tap feature, as well as some health features like their sleep apnea notifications, as well as skin temperature tracking. There's now faster charging, and again, they're keeping the price pretty much the same. So the SE2 was a little bit hard to recommend without that always-on display, but the SE3, definitely an easy recommendation now. And the lines are actually getting a little bit more blurred now between the SE3 and the Series 11, but the SE3 is a good buy. And we also have to talk about the Amazfit T-Rex 3 Pro. And the reason we have to talk about this one is that it's the first watch outside of Garmin to come out with a dedicated LED flashlight. Amazfit's pace of development is crazy fast, so it's kind of no surprise that they were the first ones out of the gate after Garmin to come out with this feature. And this is one of those fan favorite features where once you have it on a watch, it's kind of hard to imagine a watch without it. And another watch I have to mention this year, and the title for this one may be like weirdest watch that I actually ended up liking quite a bit, is the Instinct 3 Crossover AMOLED, or I think the official name was the Garmin Instinct Crossover AMOLED, something like that. Anyways, odd name, cool watch. So what they did with this is basically take their Instinct 3 AMOLED and give it the hybrid smartwatch treatment, where this has real analog hands on top of an AMOLED display. Now, the original crossover was a really cool concept, but I quite simply had a hard time reading that memory pixel display over all the analog goodness on top of it. But with the Instinct 3 Crossover AMOLED, that basically solves that because the AMOLED display is just so much brighter. But not only that, they took advantage of all those colors where they did some really cool things with the interface. I mean, there were just so many little party tricks and Easter eggs on this watch that not only made it look cool, but also really fun to use. This is definitely not a watch for everyone, but definitely a unique watch I wanted to mention. So there were definitely a lot of great things to come out this year, but if I had to pick one as my favorite pieces of sports tech of 2025, it would be the AirPods Pro 3s. And there's really two main reasons for this. One, the sound quality way better, but two, the heart rate sensors. So I listen to a ton of music and podcasts, so that sound quality is definitely pretty important to me. So I pretty much have these with me everywhere I go, but a bonus is that I always have heart rate sensors as well. But the heart rate sensing bit is kind of interesting. So first off, it's awesome that they're pretty darn reliable, at least for my testing, but as a sports tech reviewer, I'm now able to use these as another reference source when it comes to heart rate accuracy for all my reviews. So for me, it's kind of like twofold here, where it works great for all of us, but it also works great for my personal job. But the only complaint I have about these though is that the heart rate tracking is locked down to that Apple ecosystem, and these would just be absolutely killer if I could actually pair these as heart rate sensors to like a bike computer or watch or something like that.